How's it going, everyone? This is Kevin. Today I want to bring along with me to talk about my favorite 3 features on the new Sony A7RV. So let's jump right into it. As you've seen, the Sony A7RV was announced on October 26th, which is pretty cool to see a new camera come out on the Sony line. Now there's some things when that comes down to the camera that I enjoy a lot, and some of the stuff that, are not that they're relevant, but they're nothing new in that aspect for me. But I want to talk about the top 3 things that I noticed on the camera that I really thought were really great to have, and I'm hoping that'll, be kind of the ball rolling for the future of the camera lines of Sony. Full disclosure, I do not have the camera with me. It's been released barely, so I'm not able to rent it out, but I want to talk about the 3 features that I honestly thought that were really great to see from everybody that has shown the camera and has been able to use it, as well from the Sony videos, which I'll be talking a little bit of their, release footage videos and everything, and showcase some of the stuff that I thought were really cool. Because I know that some people want to see some example footage, but you can find a lot of cool YouTubers that have the camera and access available to use the camera for video and for photos. And if you don't, I'll leave them down below so you can go check them out as well. Now, one of the cool new features that I thought was amazing, and I hope every camera body has going forward, is the Sony A7RV's flip up and flip out screen. My Sony A7 IV, which is right here, only has this flip out screen, which isn't a horrible screen. I love this. Actually, it's pretty cool to use that you're able to get new different angles from just like a flip up screen. But the new articulating screen from the Sony A7RV is just that good for every angle you can think of. The way that it works is kind of like the Panasonic, I think it's like the GH6 or one of those Panasonic ones. Can't remember exactly which one, but they have the articulating screen where you can kind of go up, you can kind of go down, you can bring it out and push it out and everything. But the cool thing about the Sony A7RVs is not that you can just only, flip up, flip down, and flip out, is that you can actually flip it out and then even out this way and up that way to get different angles that you can think of, which I think is phenomenal when it comes down to a camera. Especially because the Sony A7R line of cameras are more geared to photography, so you're going to be having to get those weird angles. As you know, if you're a photographer, you're going to be kind of crouching down on the ground, taking some weird photos with backaches and everything. So having those different angles with positioning into the camera, LCD screen is pretty cool to be able to just get a different type of perspective without having to break your back having to do so. It just seems sturdier for me and makes more sense because even with my Sony A7 IV, if I do the flip out screen, it seems like any motion of just barely putting any pressure could just break the screen off. And it's something that is always in the back of my mind whenever I'm filming, that I'm hoping that nothing goes wrong, that somebody just runs into it and breaks my camera that simply and horribly. Because if I want to do the flip up screen, I have to still bring it out here and then have it this way so I can be filming, which isn't the most ideal when it comes down to out run and gun kind of style videography. So that's something really cool that I thought the Sony A7RV has, which I wish my cameras already had, but they better be keeping it going forward for every camera that Sony puts out. Now the next thing is just the new autofocus with AI that the Sony A7RV has, which is unreal to me. Apparently with the way that autofocus works with the AI, it just kind of gets that skeletal kind of system of your body and follows the person that way to know where they're moving to keep them in focus that way. Now, Sony is already known for really great autofocus, in my honest opinion, from personal experiences using them versus, Nikon or Canon, and even some of the Lumix cameras that I've been able to use from friends of mine. Something that's really cool to me is just having that AI help you out to make sure you're not losing focus on some of the stuff that just matters the most with a lot of noise when it comes down to portraits. For me personally, I do a lot of portraits in motion, meaning sports photography, and as well with people moving around with, just being out in nature or something along the lines that sometimes the autofocus might not pick up as well because there might be a little tree branch getting too close to the subject or something along the lines that just might affect it. But with having this new AI autofocus, I think going forward, if most cameras tend to have that as kind of like the base ground, it'll help out to have just that much better autofocus when it comes down to video and photography for cameras from the Sony line. I feel like that's going to make Sony step even further out of their competition when it comes down to the autofocus and that aspect. That'll help them out to just achieve a lot more, people wanting to shoot with their camera, especially for portraits, especially if you're one of the people with like wedding photography that you need to have that, in the moment. There's no way to redo it. You have to be sharp as can be. So that's something that's pretty great to me, seeing the new autofocus with the AI. That's just unreal to me to see just that skeletal kind of like feel that it just follows you because of that. It just makes your frame that way and it follows that subject that way a lot easier, which having that great autofocus is great for photography, since this is more of a geared camera for photographers with their R series with some video, which that's understandable. But now speaking about video, something that I thought was a great feature is having that 8K footage without having to pay the 8K price like the A1. Now I know 8K is not gonna be the necessary thing just yet or the standard for a lot of stuff, but it is future-proofing yourself for the future because you can do a lot of things with the 8K footage. It's really nice that you're able to crop in when needed if you wanna, not have the right focal length at that time, so you can crop in and have it in post, whatever you want to keep in sections, or if you want to do crop ins and crop outs like this for whenever you're just doing talking head videos, to just add a little bit of diversity in your footage of your videos. Now the cool thing as well is that you can do some APS-C mode and the 8K to down to APS-C mode. It'll still do like a 6.2K oversampling to my knowledge. That's pretty cool because you're still getting the nice quality even though you're doing the APS-C mode. Now if you want more detail about that stuff, Gerald Undone did a great phenomenal video speaking more about that stuff, which you can watch right here. But like I said, this camera is geared more to photography, so you are limited to a certain degree when it comes down to the video. You can only do 8K 24 and 30 and then up to 4K 60, and then after that it just kind of falls off with a full HD 120 and so on like that, which isn't horrible if you're wanting to have a phenomenal photography camera with some video. But what's a little bit of a downfall that I guess is my negative star when it comes down to this camera is that it should be a standard to just have 10-bit all the way throughout. From the specs that I was reading, the 120 frames per second is just 8-bit, which isn't horrible, but if you're wanting to have a little bit of that extra boost or whatever, just having 10-bit and 1080p is a lot nicer than just having to do 8-bit, because 1080p is already kind of fallen apart if you do too much with the color grading. So adding that with 8-bit is just not as great to have. And for the price point, I mean, it makes sense why they're not doing the 4K 120, because they don't want to take away from the A1. But at the same time, it's just starting to get to the standard of what's going to be the new, like standard for cameras going forward. Are they all going to have 10-bit going forward better? And even though they're not at the 4K 120 resolution, perhaps. So for me, I hope that more cameras will be gearing into doing just 10-bit color all the way throughout, no matter if it's in a full HD or not, because at least that way you have a little bit more room to wiggle when it comes down to color grading, since most people and everything is gearing towards video and photo. So having a phenomenal camera like the Sony A7RV have that 10-bit all the way throughout would be nice, rather than stopping at the 4K 60. That's like my only negative connotation when it comes down to that. Not really is it necessary for most people, because 4K 60 is more than enough. I catch myself using 4K 60 relatively enough with my A7 IV than sometimes a 4K 120 with my Sony A7S3, even though that sometimes I'll still use a 4K 120 just because if I'm filming more with my camera with the A7S3, which is more my video camera centered, I'll still just do the 4K 120 and sometimes even just only drop it down to 40% like the speed, so that it's like 4K 60 in a sense, just because I kind of get lazy and I don't think anybody's noticed. So take that for what you will. And I guess the one little other downfall would be the rolling shutter. From what I saw in some of the videos that Gerald Undone did that I already talked about, to go check it out. If you haven't, please do so. They'll show you the rolling shutter when it comes down to it. It's kind of jello-y and everything. I mean, it's like the A7 IV style, but like the video that I made for the Sony A7 IV about the rolling shutter, it's only really bad if you're really panning back and forth. So if you're not panning that hard, I think you'll be fine. So just do that with what you will. I thought it would be something worth mentioning. But other than that, the top 3 features that I said are just phenomenal to me, and that's what makes this camera pretty great overall. Because at the end of the day, for a camera that's about $3,900, it's actually pretty great features that it comes down to it, because it's that middle ground between the Sony A7 IV to the A1, where you get a good mix of both of them, but you're not breaking the bank either to trying to get that 8K like how the A1 has, but you still get that 4K 60, at least it's full frame and not crop like the A7 IV, and you get phenomenal autofocus with 61 megapixels. So if that's something that you're into and you're wanting to have more photography geared camera, this is a great camera camera to invest into rather than the Sony A7R4, which they're not that different to a certain degree in a lot of aspects, but there is a lot more upgrades now with the Sony A7R5, which I would hope so. If you're going to spend that much money onto a new camera and it's 2022, I would hope it would have better, video specs for even a photography-based camera. But when it comes down for me, I don't think I'll need this camera anytime soon. I think my Sony A7 IV is just phenomenal when it comes down to the photography with the video so that I can have a good hybrid camera. Since for me, I do a good 50-50, split when it comes down to my content creation with photography and videography. So having the A7 IV for me has been phenomenal because I can choose just to only bring that camera and leave my A7S III behind, or I can just bring both of the cameras to kind of do one more photo centered and one more video centered, and even just get away with having to use my Sony A7 IV just because I want to take good photos and some video behind the scenes and everything, and not, feel like I'm not going to get everything that I need to. The Sony A7R5 is going to be a phenomenal camera for those that really need more photo geared, centered cameras, especially with the higher megapixel count. If you need to crop in more because your job requires it for you, that'll be great. But for me personally, I think it's not going to be the camera just yet for me. Maybe in the future, if I need to get something better than the A7 IV, might be upgrading to the A7R5 might make sense, but for now I think I'll be sticking with my cameras. But if you're in the market for a new camera, especially that's more photo centered and you want to upgrade with having some good video specs, the Sony A7R5 could be for you. And I just know that the only feature that I hope going forward all cameras tend to have, or even if they do like an upgrade of the Sony A7 IV with it, will be the flip up screen that the Sony A7R5 has. That's the only thing that I would prefer having from the A7R5 right now than to my Sony A7 IV, because it's something that would be more beneficial to me. But other than that, I'm still happy with what I have, so that's just pretty much it. But with all that said and done, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, share this video with a friend. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya.